Hey, good morning, everybody. This is People of Substance by LemonSkies, and I'm excited to have on Meghan Speer, my guest today. She's executive director of the Nonprofit Hub, which we'll talk about in just a minute, coming to us from sunny Pittsburgh.
Well, sunny is a bit of an exaggeration, but definitely from Pittsburgh.
Yeah. So Meghan, I'm just going to jump right in. So you and I have known each other for a little while, but I actually don't know how you ended up in the nonprofit sector.
Oh, I feel like most people, it's kind of a little bit of a winding journey that got me there. But I would say my first job in the nonprofit sector, my first big kid job, if you will, I was working as director of communication and marketing for a Christian school here in Pittsburgh. It's the largest Christian school in the area. And so kind of got my feet wet into nonprofit marketing and fundraising in that element. The school obviously was its own nonprofit. And so I was handling all of their communication and marketing, specifically around admissions and alumni relations and managing all of those different constituencies, which was my first kind of, I would say, dip into the nonprofit marketing field, because everything that I learned in college was all like, everything was based in for-profit. And it was like, you have a widget and you sell a widget to the people. And that is the role of marketing. But it was such an eye-opening experience to realize how many different audiences a nonprofit marketer has to talk to. And it made the job so much more fun because I was constantly talking to a different group of people. And I really enjoyed that element of it. So that was kind of my first toe in. And then I've been working with nonprofits, specifically a lot around digital media and fundraising for the majority of my career.
Very cool. Well, I'm glad you made the switch. And then at some point, you made your way to the Nonprofit Hub.
Yes.
What is the Nonprofit Hub?
Yeah. So in a very meta description of it, Nonprofit Hub is a nonprofit for the people who run nonprofits. So essentially, we are an educational collective. We're a nonprofit ourselves, but we're an educational collective that focuses on making learning and professional development resources available to nonprofit leaders, specifically in the areas of board management, HR, finance, fundraising, and marketing. So essentially, all of those kind of maybe back of house skills that everyone just expects you to have because you've come into a leadership position at an organization, but no one's ever bothered to teach you. We work with so many leaders every day who are super passionate about the thing, right? So they either went out and founded a nonprofit because they wanted to make a difference around that topic, or they were really great at running the program at the organization that they've been a part of. But they've never had to do budget forecasting. They've never had to figure out how to write a fundraising plan or a marketing plan. We've never had to try and recruit board members and figure out what a healthy board looks like. So that's where we really come alongside. So we do that through our blog, through our webinar series, through our own podcast, which you have certainly been on, as well as some online courses and resource guides, and then our conference every year that happens in the fall, just to really make professional development and learning as accessible as possible to nonprofit leaders.
Well, and some of those things are not just nice to have, right? Like some of the compliance related issues, like you could easily go under for non-compliance.
Absolutely. And there's so many of those pieces. You know, I talked to just yesterday, actually, was talking to a lady who founded a nonprofit. And one of my first questions when somebody says they're newer, it's a startup, I just started my organization, whatever, my first question every time is, tell me about your board. Right? Because it can be a make or break for so many organizations. And so she went on to tell me the story that I have heard from countless organizations, which is, oh yeah, it's my cousin's on there and one of my friends from college and my neighbor across the street, her husband's on my board. Like, okay, great. I'm sure they're all lovely. But let's talk about the role of an actual board and what we need to make sure that your board is doing for you. And she had a really kind of eye-opening look at what the board should be doing and how that should be functioning. But again, like we're not teaching that in college. We're not, nobody's teaching you how to do those pieces of the job. So that's where Nonprofit Hub comes in.
So you get to talk as part of your job to many people, both in established nonprofits and those who are newer to the space. What are some hot topics that keep coming up in conversations recently?
So I think the top one that everybody wants to talk about all the time is AI and the ethical use of AI and how do we, how do nonprofits stay on top of it? I will say generally nonprofits don't tend to be like the most technology advanced orgs, right? We tend to maybe be a little behind. So even discussions that maybe on how AI has been used, especially around some automation and marketing automation that B2C companies or in for-profit companies have been using for a while, we're just now dipping our toe in. So there's a lot of conversation around that. The other thing that is high on everybody's list right now, and it is a significant problem in the space, is nonprofit burnout. And how, because so many organizations, people are being asked to solve the world's problems with less and less resource and less staff. So folks are just, especially those frontline boots on the ground kind of folks, are really burning out, and it's a problem that needs to get addressed. So that is a number one concern for a lot of people right now.
Are they burning out and leaving the sector, or are they burning out and just sort of productivity output declines?
Yeah, a little of both. A lot of folks are leaving the sector and going to for-profit or going to companies that maybe serve the nonprofit space if they want to keep their toe dipped in there. But they're so burnt out. I talked to somebody the other day who is in the process of looking for their next piece and their next career move, because right now they're working 75, 80 hours a week. And it's never enough. They always need more, and it's just not sustainable.
Yeah,
for someone who is, and the work that they are doing are with the unhoused here in Pittsburgh, right? So it is a gigantic need. The need is not going anywhere, but also what we're paying folks sometimes in those roles doesn't always make up for an 80-hour work week and give you the balance that you need. So I think it's a multifaceted problem, but one that we're going to have to address here pretty quickly before there's nobody that wants to work at nonprofits anymore.
It's sort of the question of professionalism in our space, right?
Yes.
So somebody who works, it's not that they're just wired differently and they just care more. Like maybe that's the case too,
Sure.
But they also have professional expertise and there's certain expectations that they have for their own, based on their education, based on their background, hours they put in.
Yeah. And I think sometimes we've done the nonprofit sector a disservice in the way that we talk about nonprofit work, right? I was at a networking event recently, and I said, I was introducing myself to somebody, and a friend of mine jumped in, and I think well-meaning jumped in, was like, they were all having a conversation about, some sort of workplace something. And his comment was, oh, well, Meghan just runs a nonprofit. She doesn't have to deal with any of that. Like, first of all, don't say just. I don't just run a nonprofit. Like that's a little condescending in and of itself, but that is unfortunately an attitude that I feel like a lot of nonprofit professionals have to deal with, which is really frustrating. It even comes down to, like, and we were talking about this earlier, the way that we title those professionals, right? I call myself the executive director of Nonprofit Hub, but in reality, there's very little difference between an executive director and a CEO at an organization. And so, but we kind of put it back a step as if it's not quite the same and take that professionalism away a little bit, which I think does everyone a disservice in the sector.
Yeah, there's so many myths, right? Like it must be easier, or you couldn't work in the corp. Well, no, that's not how that works. And actually,
in reality, I'd love to see some corporate CEOs come in and try and run a nonprofit and realize that they don't have, hundreds of thousands of dollars of budget to work with.
Well, that's it, right? It's with a bigger budget, you can do anything.
Exactly.
It solves a lot of problems.
But I have repeatedly said, I think nonprofit executive director is one of the most undervalued jobs out there. It is crazy hard. Yeah. Any executive director that's trying to figure out how to solve big problems in the world with little, generally with little budget, with not enough staff. It's impossible. It's so hard, and we don't give those folks, I feel like, enough credit and enough due.
So you talked, Megan, a little bit about topics you hear about. What are some topics that you don't hear about that we really should be concerning ourselves with?
That's a great question. I think one of the things that I've started to see more of it, shout out to the folks at Memory Fox for really pushing this initiative. But I have been a champion for a long time about the way that nonprofits tell stories. I'm super excited to see the ethical story report or ethical storytelling report coming out. Super excited to see that people are finally starting to turn the tide in that regard. Because I do think for a long time, the way that we've told stories is problematic. And so I would love to see more people jumping on board. I would love to see more organizations talking about it and figuring out how to do it better. Because that is one that I think is a super important topic for all of us right now.
Yeah. So you and I have a mutual love of coffee shops and going to work at a coffee shop.
I love it.
You get started my day.
Yep, just came from one myself.
So I wanted to ask you, what does a typical day look like for somebody who's an executive director of an organization? And yours is a little bit different in the sense because you intercept with so many other individuals. So what is a typical day for Megan? And the nitty gritty, like what makes you happy?
What's it look like? Yeah, so mine is a little different than a traditional nonprofit because we are a national organization that is a fully remote team, right? So there's not necessarily an office I have to go to. My team is scattered. But I do host the Nonprofit Hub podcast. So normally 2 or 3 times a week, I've got podcast interviews that we're trying to do to get folks in there. I also host our webinar series every Wednesday. And oversee all of our sponsorship and partnership activities. So a lot of my day is spent talking to and working alongside professionals who want to talk to a nonprofit audience, right? Who want that outreach. We very much function under a sponsorship model instead of a donor model. So we do a lot of work with content partners because every week we put out a new blog post, our email newsletter, a webinar, and a new podcast episode. And twice a month, we're putting out free resource guides. That's a lot of content.
It is
a lot of content. And I, frankly, am not that interesting and don't have that much to say. So other people have to be a part of that because if we were just relying on me, we would run out of things to say pretty quickly. So I work with a lot of content partners across the country, from nonprofit consultants to CRM companies to bookkeeping agencies, anybody who really wants to speak to a nonprofit audience to help influence that content, help get that content out there, and support our nonprofits that way.
Well, I'm going to disagree about not being interesting, but I can understand desire to, it's a lot easier to, I enjoy asking questions because I can imagine just ginning up a whole bunch of stuff new day in and day out to talk about. So,
but I will say, back to the coffee shop piece. So there's, I live right downtown in Pittsburgh, and there's a bunch of coffee shops within walking distance. My favorite one is about 3/4 of a mile away. So it's a nice little walk to get there and a nice little walk back. I hate any sort of things that I'm not a giant admin. I am not a gifted administrator. I would say it that way. So when I have to do things that are, board reports, budgets, spreadsheets, any of the analytical, statistical side, that's where I block out time and go work from a coffee shop. Because if I have to do what I deem to be the work that annoys me, then I would rather do it in a really great location with a really great latte.
I can absolutely. It's so relatable. There's some tasks that you just avoid.
Yeah. And I have to do them. I understand that my role as the executive director is I am responsible for those things. I have to get them done. That doesn't mean I have to do them. Yeah, I can do them as enjoyably as possible, which means going to work from a coffee shop.
That's fair. So on the point of being interesting, I did some snooping and I did give you a heads up about this.
Yes.
So I know you volunteer at a performing arts organization, which I always find it so interesting
Yeah,
where people, where passions are and where they get involved. Can you talk a little bit about that?
absolutely. I'd be happy to. So, like I said, I live on the north side of Pittsburgh, which is a pretty urban area. It's right in the heart of the city. And there's an organization here called the Urban Impact Foundation. They run performing arts programming, as well as athletics, education, and some job readiness stuff for high schoolers. But in general, the other three programs run first through 12th grade. And so this is my 12th or 13th year teaching musical theater at their Performing Arts Academy. So this year I have 17 8th through 12th grade students that are in my musical theater class. Most of them are returning. I have a handful of new, but most of them are returning, have been in my class for a while. It's so fun. I was a theater kid growing up. Like that was my, that was what I did. And even in college, I was a communication major with a performing arts minor. So now during the day, I get to be a communication professional and lead the nonprofit that way for a content driven organization. And then in the afternoons, once a week, I get to go be a theater kid again. I will say last year I was like the milestone of my teaching, and I will send you a video if you want it. My kids decided that they really wanted to take on a challenge. They wanted to try something new. I had a couple seniors that were really driving this boat. But they decided they wanted to do the number King of New York from Newsies. And so I had 12 kids in the class last year, 12 kids who had never had tap shoes on their feet prior to us taking this on. And so in a 9-week period, they went from never having tap shoes on their feet to performing King of New York with a whole like dance break tap sequence in the middle. And they were phenomenal. It is the crowning achievement of my of my theater life that they did as well as they did. I just took like ducks to water to learning tap. They were fantastic at it. So it was really fun. This semester we're working on doing a number from The Greatest Showman called Come Alive. So they'll be doing that at their showcase here in a couple weeks.
Well, I think we need to drop a link to the video for sure.
Yes,
so
they were amazing.
Do they call you Miss Spear?
They say Miss Meghan.
Miss Meghan. Okay.
Yes.
So you're like a theater person, like Broadway. That's kind of.
Yeah, I grew up in a very musical family. Grew up singing from the youngest of ages. Even now, like if you were to be at my family's house for a birthday, happy birthday is 3 verses long and it's all done in 4-part harmony. Like we do a lot of performing together. We've done a lot of, it's kind of like that old song. So like I sing soprano, my mom sings alto, my brother sings tenor, and my dad sings bass. And so we do a lot of 4-part that way. My aunt gets in on the mix. It's super fun that way. But yes, I grew up in a performing family, so that love of theater runs pretty deep.
That's very cool. I'm not gonna brag, but I was booted from choir for inability to carry a tune. Right there.
Yeah, we definitely grew up singing. It was part of actually my grandmother and her 2 sisters were a trio of kind of like the heyday of radio, right? They sang a lot of the stuff on WJAS here in Pittsburgh and did the whole thing back then.
Like with the hair and the whole deal.
Oh, with the hair and the whole tight 3-part, very Andrews Sisters-esque, except they were the Weston sisters instead.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Megan, it is such a delight to talk to you every time we talk, and I get to
so fun.
more. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Thanks for everything you're doing, and we'll hold you up to dropping the link to some tap dancing routine.
Yes, we'll give you some tap dancing students.
That would be great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks, Olga.